we started. As part of the organization, we partner with many others. We've partnered over the years with others to generate green projects. We've concentrated in the mostly Connecticut. We've done some work in Westchester County, New York, but most of the work outside of Connecticut has been medical. So in Connecticut, one of the major projects that I've been involved with is the Shelton Riverfront development, which I've been involved there for going on 18 years, which includes all of the riverfront properties on Canal Street, of which 450 units so far have been developed, with an additional 450 to go. When this project was brought to my attention, I had met with a number of people from the neighborhood, and as a matter of fact, the concept, the site development concept, was done in collaboration with Tucker Chase, which is an architect that lives in the same area, I guess, the Shakespeare area.
Yeah, he's a neighbor.
So he basically assisted me in developing the site concept, and I gave a lot of thought to the type of project that which I believe was fitting for this location, and I went for a medium density type of development with multiple buildings to try to create not only housing that dealt with the requirements of the RFP, which was the traffic oriented, or TRD district. So if you look at my site development plan, basically you have East Broadway, you have Sutton Avenue, you have some of the existing buildings facing East Broadway, and then the concept is sort of a courtyard type of design where you have buildings, so all the main entrances for the main buildings are located within that courtyard. And that accommodates most of the 2-bedroom units. And so if there is any type of children, any families with young children, the courtyard would be their playground area. Aside from that, I have some townhouse units also on Sutton Place, but those are basically 1-bedroom transit, oriented development. And so we try to maintain some of the trees. We're on site. Here's Biagio.
How much I'm late?
Hey, Biagio.
Do you want to introduce yourself before I go?
Biagio Barone, John Getz, yeah.
Okay. Biagio also, I believe, is a Stratford resident.
Yes, lifelong Stratford resident.
But as I said before, Biagio partnered with me on this development. And this, even though it's, Primrose is the main entity, it's basically a 50-50, venture with Biagio Barone on the development end. So, as I said, we try to maintain some of the site features such as the existing trees. We thought about a concept of connecting the two sites to get easier access to the train. But for the most part, new development of 72 units. And within those 72 units, I believe we have the makeup of 34 2-bedroom, 18 1-bedroom, and 30 studio apartments. So if you look at the concept, basically that's an aerial view of the proposal, which again you'll see that the 4 main buildings, the 3 smaller buildings, and then one feature that I've included, which is a early childhood care, small facility that has 4 classrooms, and this we believed was something that would benefit the community and also the development. And then as stated, the courtyard program to give access, so all the main entrances are within that courtyard development. That's basically it. As stated, Biagio's done a number of developments. More recently, he converted the office building
Ferry Boulevard.
from Boulevard into apartments. Primrose is right now underway with various developments throughout the area, Fairfield, Bridgeport. We started, a $25 million project on the corner of Congress and Main Street, down the street from Bridgeport, the old town, City Hall. And we're continuing with construction of projects on Canal Street in Shelton. On this one here, the bank that we have set up for it is Ion Bank. They've committed to finance this project. So again, depending on, what else, this committee or the town would, introduce into the development as what they believe would be needed changes, we would consider. But ultimately, this is a type of program that we had envisioned. Didn't ask for any tax abatement programs, didn't ask for any special, concessions from the town, other than, normal procedures. I'm hopeful that the town will change their WPCA fees, because of the major cost, initial cost, but otherwise, this is a very simple design program that can be enacted very, quickly. Construction for this would take probably, I would think it would take about 6 months by the time we go through the various town approvals, construction documents, the closing, and do all the normal site assessments and so forth. It would be I would say a 6 month, period. So if we were selected, I would say that sometime in the spring, late spring, that construction could start. That's our basic presentation. We'll answer questions.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Well, thank you for your presentation. I'll be in the question and answer portion of the presentation. You talk a lot in depth about the early childhood daycare center that you're proposing on site. So I think that ties into one of the questions that I had, and that is, how would you describe the demographic of your target market? Are you geared towards families, millennials, young professionals, things like that? So maybe you can speak to that.
Well, my experience has been that these areas tend to attract young professionals, and in many cases, not just individuals, but couples. This is geared for those couples that, they have to travel to New York, to work, or locally. For the most part, what we've been finding in other similar developments is that, the couple, if they're a young couple, both professional at times, they'll initiate their family in a situation like this, but eventually move on. So this was geared to accommodate that.
Can I just suggest that we reintroduce ourselves when we ask a question, just because Biagio hasn't met everybody yet?
Sorry about that, sorry.
No, that's okay.
No worries, I should have introduced myself. So I'm Patrick Carlton, I'm with the Connecticut Metropolitan Council of Governments. We're the regional planning agency for the greater Bridgeport region, which includes our member municipality being the town of Stratford. So I apologize,
Yeah.
it's nice to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you. Okay.
Okay. Jamie Millward, I'm chairman of the Architecture Review Board in town of Stratford. So you got into a little bit about the amenities of the early child care center, but can you talk a little bit about the importance of that amenity and other amenities you might offer, whether it's for the residents within the complex or to the greater whole of the community, that might make this attractive to both people who live there, but also to be welcomed by your neighbors, the people who live around there, and so a little bit about that, perhaps?
Well, quite frankly, it's always difficult to mix, a private development with public amenities. In this particular case, the only true amenity that, we created was a green space in the courtyard for, to accommodate the children. And the early childhood center, which could include, some conference rooms or some other amenities to, for the community.
Classrooms, yeah.
But there is, with the exception of, and I think you'll see on the plan that I also, what I was told was that the town was lacking in parking for this facility, so we introduced some additional parking for it. Just sort of to accommodate, but I think some of those details can be dealt with, later on, once you get into the formal design stage of it. But as far as, the amenities, other than the early childhood, some conference rooms included in there, the children's play area, leaving some of the open space, and then interconnection between possibly, and again, it would have to, with easier access to the train station. We really didn't think of any other, so-called public amenities.
I'd like to expand that just for a minute, if I may. So what drove you to, out of all the possibilities of things you can build, why a daycare?
My wife is just retired she was co-founder of the St. Teresa's Early Childhood program in Trumbull, and my daughter-in-law is an early childhood teacher at Montessori. So that's sort of, brought.
There's also waiting lists right now. I mean, we have 2 young children too. There's waiting lists right now for daycares. I mean, for preschools, daycares to get in. I mean, 6 months out, year out, so there's even further. So there's a big demand for it right now. So we thought it would help to.
And then if you were chosen, would you be willing to accept a stipulation that that would be daycare in perpetuity? The concern being that it's daycare tomorrow, today and tomorrow it's a smoke shop or something, so it would be a restriction on the playing.
Well, the building's been designed for that, for the purpose of, so it's 1 floor, slab on grade, all of the toilet facilities to accommodate the toddlers and so forth. So, it wasn't designed to be modified, and I don't really, at that location, you do have restrictions because, again, this will be part of the design program that will be, accepted by the town. So any change in the future of that particular building would have to go to the town. So I just don't see that, there's always, in this business, there's always, something that comes up that.
But it's not built on speculation. We're gonna have an operator that's gonna go in there and,
And then it's gonna
Sign
be
a
part of
deal.
the
We already
plan
have
that
someone
that
that's
the
gonna-
town approves.
Yeah.
So it's not,
But there's a big need for it right now, big demand.
Ryan Argos, I'm the chair of the Stratford Historic District Commission. And, Chris, you mentioned you had talked with Tucker Chase and gotten input. Chris, if you could describe the inspiration or the approach that drove you to the solution, to the plan that you put together.
but again, it was, if you look at as part of my submission, I, actually provided design plans for every single building. And if you go through it, it's, there's the thought of dealing with the requirements of the transit-oriented type of program, which has to do with the type of units that are being introduced, and, the design forum. So there were considerations. One was that if there were going to be some families with young children, that the courtyard, would act as a safe, haven for the play areas and so forth. And then, again, as I said, I had numerous meetings with Tucker Chase just to get his input, because again, he does live there. And I know that there was, from not only what I read, but also what I was informed, there's a lot of opposition to the last proposal from the neighborhood. And so I wanted to make sure that I had, because it wasn't just with Tucker, I met with others from that area. And I just wanted to make sure that that the program that we were putting together, that they had the input, and they also, provided insight as to what they believed was what, that they not necessarily accept, but what they, would support. So this program is developed on that basis.
Hi, I'm Smith Actor, I'm the town planner in town of Stratford. So I just wanted to know, based on what upon your experience, what market research have you conducted to arrive at the size of the building and the number of units, and if you've ever considered accommodating any deed restricted units in the mix?
Well, you know, one of the things that Primrose specializes in is affordable housing. Primrose has been partnering with Mutual Housing, both of South Central Connecticut and Southwestern Connecticut, for over 15 years. You know, during the years that Salem Square Bruno, who's now the Commissioner of Housing, she was Executive Director of Mutual Housing, or Neighborhood Works, or Horizons of New Haven. And we have developed probably a few hundred, you know, units of, or as a matter of fact, right now we're under construction with one project on Canal Street as part of that massive development. I wanted to make sure that we had an affordable housing component to it, and right now we've got one building, 68 apartments, which is, you know, what do you call it? 45 units of that are, you know, the mixed income housing. So you know, it's like anything else, most of the, you know, we have projects that right now are going through the approval process at Fairfield, where Fairfield has mandated, you know, a certain percentage of every project that's, multifamily project that's developed, have a percentage of affordable housing. So here, it wasn't a consideration, but it doesn't mean that, you know, we wouldn't entertain something. I think it's, you know, once we get to that stage, it's more of, okay, how do we accommodate what the town wishes are? And I wouldn't go more than 10% here if we went down that road. But, you know, this site could accommodate without any problem with 10% affordable component too.
Yeah, and what was your market research on those sizes?
It's just basic, you know, on the basis of the experience that we have. I mean, we've been under constant construction of multifamily projects for the past 30-some years. Most recently, you know, we just converted one building, well, Diageo converted the one on Ferry Boulevard. We converted Spongex, which was right on the Shell Derby Bridge, into 48 apartments. You know, so we just, again, it's just a vast experience of, you know, what the markets are, and we know, you know, it's like downtown Bridgeport. Everybody thinks, oh, Bridgeport, but right now there's a tremendous need for housing in downtown Bridgeport. There's a shortage of housing, you know, why? Because again, the train station, any of the train stations right now are you know, are in demand. And that's because, you know, the people coming out of New York, they're driving right now the Connecticut real estate market. That's why, you know, there's such a, you know, massive problem with single family homes right now. You know, so in some cases they're going 100,000 more than their, you know, the asking price, which is, you know, crazy. But so right now we're finding that because of a shortage of single family homes, that there's a high demand for apartments. The market is again, it's all market driven. But you know, in Shelton, when I started the program there, some, you know, 50, the actual construction, the first building was done, was CO'd 12 years ago or so. And, you know, our rents were $1,200 to $1,400. Well, those same rents now are $2,200 and $2,400, you know, within that period of time. Within the last 2 years, they went up about 20%. So this is, you know, and I'm sure it's the same thing is happening in Stratford and everywhere else. So right now, there's a major demand for this type of housing, especially adjacent to the train stations, where people, you know, they don't want to drive, they're going to take the train.
Okay, Jamie Miller again, Architecture Review Board. So can you talk specifically about the one single project you've completed in your past portfolio that you think most and best resembles this development? Can you pick one out that you think that?
Well, you know, all of them are different. I mean, if you go in Trumbull, as an example, we developed Twin Brooks, which was a senior housing complex. that's right, you know, by, I don't know if you're familiar with Trumbull, but right on White Plains Road. We also did two of them, Colonial Village 1 and Colonial Village 2 on Main Street near the end of Route 25, you know, highway. So I mean, there's, you know, as I said, we've done hundreds of developments. This one here is unique because again, of the Tucker Chase, you know, input into the development.
Well, I guess all those, I don't think were TO, how about more specifically then, I understand there might be lots to choose from, but either TOD type, actual TOD projects or projects of similar scale. I'm kind of familiar with those projects you mentioned. I'm not sure about the scale of those, number of units, square footage, but is there one you can point to that's similar in size and perhaps is a TOD project?
Well, you know, again, the TOD, the transit-oriented projects are sort of new in the sense that these, you know, this has been pushed within the past, you know, 5-6 years. So it's not, you know, they're all of them are somewhat different. This is more of a, even though it's transit-oriented, it's more of a community, you know, type of program that's being developed. But, you know, we've done, as I said, downtown Shelton, 450 units of development. And, you know, again, it's not transit oriented, but, you know, it's development. You know, here in Bridgeport, we've done hundreds of, you know, units throughout the city, all with different requirements and different type of programs. But as far as this type of housing, it's, you know, again, it's residential. There's the transit-oriented component because it's adjacent to the train station. You know, it's you know, so and again, we not only do we specialize in design, development, construction for ourselves, we also do it for others. Right now, we have a number of similar projects in Fairfield. One right at the center of Fairfield that we're going through. That's going to be a transit-oriented development as well. We've you know, we have, you know, various. That's, you know. We have a project that is in the final stages of approval at Sacred Heart University, which, you know, I mean, it's, you know, the list just goes on and on and on. So it's not, again, being in business as long as we have been, you know, there's multiple projects throughout the area that we've developed.
Thank you.
Yeah, George Perry, I'm on the chair of the
Yep.
selection committee as well as the chair of the RDA for the town strategy.
Pleasure to meet you.
So thanks for joining us. So can you just give us a briefing on your, the calculations, how you came up with the number of parking spaces versus the number of units?
Generally, you know, I always try to provide a 1.5 ratio.
That's what you use there?
Yeah, I mean, it's not, you go to a lot of the communities, I mean, you know, recent cases where, outside of a situation like this, but if you follow a lot of the court cases that have happened in recent years where certain municipalities have denied the projects, zoning commissions have denied the projects on the basis of parking where they're in the transit-oriented area, the judges have ruled against the commissions. Most recently, in Fairfield, you had one that was a 1.18 ratio that, you know, the commission felt was not adequate, and the judge went against the commission. But, you know, I always try to, any projects that have more than 30 units or so, I always try to go with a 1.5 ratio of parking, especially in a transit-oriented area. You know, but people fail to understand that, you know, unlike New York City, where many people don't have cars, here in Connecticut, if they're using the train, they're parking their vehicle, so it requires a location, you know, to sit. So the ratio that I use is 1.5.
Is that per unit or per bed?
Per unit. But, you know, here, the majority, I mean, we have 30, you know, studios. You know, the majority of the apartments are basically one bedroom.
Yeah, forgive me, because I honestly forget, how many spaces do you have on this site?
I forget, no, I'd have to,
I think we have 156 spaces.
What was it?
156. So you didn't look in our TOD reservation for the parking ratio?
Basically, I took two things into consideration. I mean, if we're looking at 156, that's a 2-to-1 ratio. But I felt that some of those vehicles would be used by the, by the town.
Yeah.
Association with the existing building. So it's not, but normally, as I said, under, in this type of development, a 1.5 ratio is what we've been finding is adequate for it. I wouldn't do it lower, if, higher is fine, if, the space is available, for it. But again, the more units you have, the less parking is required.
I think, so the 156 is the total on the site,
Yeah,
but that would include parking for daycare.
yeah.
Then we have a, allocation that we need of at least 20 on the surface for, the BOE, and that was just for visitors, but then we have the BOE, staff. So, it seems like you're not gonna get to your 1.5 if you go on at 156, right?
Well, the daycare, if you basically need,
That's fine.
half a dozen spaces.
It's just drop off.
It's a drop off, and if you look at the program, it has a drop off area, and then you just basically need parking for the staff, the teachers and staff. So that's not a major parking requirement, for it. So if we're looking at 72 units, we need, at a 1.5, we need about 110 or 120 spaces at the most. So it leaves you 36 spaces, 6 for the daycare and 30, for the city, the town to utilize.
So that answers my question, my next question. I was gonna ask, what's your allocation of parking spaces for residents, Board of Ed, and public? So,
That's basically the ratios.
So, as part of the RFP, if you recall, it was somewhat because of the pushback that we had in the original, submittal, is there was a big concern, not only the town, but also from the community and also from the historic district, about the sea of parking. And so it was a mandate in the RFP to have underground parking, and you chose not to do that for some reason. Can you explain
It
that?
has to do with the economics. Look, nobody's gonna, it doesn't matter who it is, nobody's gonna build a public parking garage on this site. The economics are just not gonna make it work. Generally, structured parking, it does well in communities where the rents are high and, taxes are low. That's not Stratford. We have the opposite in Stratford. So we would not, for us, it would not be economically viable to do structured parking to accommodate, this type of development.
Okay, thank you.
In terms of, your projection, the rent and expenses, what did you base those off of?
Generally, what the area is, we own buildings, we own, buildings that, in the city of Bridgeport, we converted 4 schools. We bought 4 schools and converted 4 schools in recent years. We own, we converted La Presti School in Sonia into housing. We've done, adaptive reuse on mill buildings throughout, the state. So we know what the market is. And, again, I always try to be conservative, with my numbers. Biagio has a recent experience, because, when did you seal that building on Third Boulevard?
January.
He's got a recent experience, and, I think here will do, better, and the reason being it's, location and,
The courtyard's very unique, very
So-
unique aspect.
So what are those expenses, the rent, what were you, in your mind, what were you thinking for rent expenses?
I have to look it up. I had the studios at 1,500. I had the townhouse with garage at 1,800, and I had the 2 bedrooms at 1,800. Now, that's pretty, you know, I mean, in some areas,
Conservative, yeah.
some areas, it's probably 20% higher. But I always try to be a little conservative, because
Yeah.
again, the problem we have with these cycles, it's the same, you know, thing that we've gone through, and I try to advise people when they're talking to me about, you know, house values. And I try to remind them that, you know, may come a point where the value of the mortgage amount is gonna be greater than the value of the house at some point. And the reason is that you have these cycles. Right now, there's a high demand, and therefore it's driving, you know, the market up. That doesn't mean that, you know, comes a year from now or 2 years from now, that it won't stabilize and, you know, come back a little. But, you know, you try to be as, you know, as reasonable as possible with all of these figures, so that you can have an understanding of, you know, the cost and the expense and income ratios, so.
And then out of that, if I can go back to, what was mentioned before, you'd be willing to, if the town requested to go to 10% affordable?
Yeah, I think it, you
And
know,
then with these rates, is that what you're saying?
no, these, I mean, you'd have a little bit of a loss, you know, on it, but it's not, right now, given, and I'm not familiar with the, you know, the Stratford's, does Stratford actually have an affordable housing? No, they don't. You know, it's like with Fairfield, they adopted, you know, theirs, but it's so-called Fairfields, which is 80% of the median income. So here, we're talking that, you know, we would have 8 units with you know, which has to be an average of all, so you probably have, you know, two and 3, whatever. And, you know, for the most part, you know, your rents are between $1,200 and $1,600. And, you know, people fail to understand that you know, a couple or an individual that's making $75,000 a year qualifies for an affordable housing unit, so it's, you know, so that the actual, you know, income loss on 10% is not tremendous, that, you know, that the project can't absorb.
Okay.
You know, it's not a.
So you wouldn't need to raise the rent of the other, in other words, the 1,800 and 1,500 as your basis point?
Not really, I mean, it's.
If you did, it'd be.
Yeah, generally, you know, my experience has also been that if the rents are maintained at a reasonable rate, you don't have as much of a turnover. And therefore, your vacancy factors aren't, you know, so if you have the right type of product and you price it accordingly, you don't have a turnover. You have a turnover when people can't, you know, are struggling to afford, you know, either it's because of location or, you know, economics and so forth. But this type of market, this is workforce housing. You know, it's not, you know, I mean, in Fairfield, the same type of unit, you're talking $3,200. So all they have to do is come another 10 minutes on the train, you know, from here to qualify for something like this. So this type of product, even though it's not as lucrative, it's safe. You know,
We like safe, yeah.
So.
What have you seen for your vacancy rates typically?
I generally on this there, I generally put in 5%.
Okay.
But again, it's, you know, we're finding for the right product, in many cases, we have less than 2%.
Thanks.
What is your financial stacking for this project? How does it include public and private dollars? I believe earlier in your presentation, you said
No,
you weren't including any public.
No, this is strictly private sector. You know, it's, we have, both Biagio and myself have relationships with various banks. My primary bank is Ion Bank, well, at least the one that's, you know, that's committed to finance this project. Generally, you know, my experience is that, you know, everybody says, well, you know, you can go for, you know, grants, you can, yeah, everything has a price. And in some, you know, instances, it's appropriate. Generally, it's appropriate where if a bank doesn't want to finance it, then you bring in the government. Otherwise, if it's financeable through market rate, then you proceed to do it, because you know it's not gonna fail.
It'll get done quicker too, right?
Well, it's less red tape, and, you know, as I said before, we specialize in affordable housing. And I know that in many times, it takes 3 to 4 years to get the project off the ground. By the time you get through, waiting for the affordable housing tax credits to be issued, going through the selection, process, being queued, because, maybe approved today without formal approval, but it'll still take 2, 3 years to catch up to the tax credits. And again, we do it, but when we do it, we partner with mutual housing and others. And as I said, we've done a few hundred units of that type of housing.
What you're referring to now is affordable housing, you would partner with mutual housing on that, is that what you're?
No, that's for this, no, this is just basically, it's private, there's deed restriction, the units, the affordable units are selected, they're approved by the town. The so-called opportunity units are selected, and then those units, I'm sure that, that the town has their, housing department, and so this would, because annually you have to provide the reports. So this, but for the most part, there's, there is, you bring in, any of these agencies are brought in when you need to provide supportive services. And therefore, they, as you probably know, they don't make a profit, they're all nonprofit. All of their income is derived for, these staff and salaries and so forth. So here it's not, it wouldn't be that. These would just be the particular units by number would be deed restricted. Yeah. So.
Thank you.
So, it's Mrs. Smith again. What does your development commission for 952 East Broadway property, and how would it complement post development?
Well, I had, again, if you look at it, we had thought that, the coffee shop would be done on the first floor, and then a couple of apartments on the second.
Or some kind of food aspect, yeah.
Do you plan on keeping the property long term?
No, we have no intentions of
Yeah.
selling.
No.
That's what
Yeah, it's gonna be.
I didn't know how, because sometimes.
We're both,
you have-
we know the area very well, we're both Stratford, your
Well,
wife
my
too,
wife's
wife's
Stratford.
Stratford, born, yeah, so we're.
So you're 50% Stratford.
Yeah,
50% Stratford.
we're rooted here, so we want it, yeah, we'd keep.
The last one.
Yes. So you chose, TOD, as you know, because I know you do a lot of them, are mixed-use developments. And this one, with the exception of the daycare, you chose not to do that. Can you just explain to us what your rationale there was?
Well, again, it's the consideration was also the neighborhood. If the site had been right on facing Main Street, then yeah, but, you're really going into a residential area. Basically, this your homes, so I envisioned that, this here would have to be developed in harmony with the residential neighborhood. And, I know right now, it's, just a humongous field, but, we didn't see it as a viable mixed-use location. And then you also have the other issues of, whenever you do, it's easier to control and finance residential developments without the mixed-use component. Once you have the mixed-use component, then you split up. You can't do triple net leases because, you have to do gross leases, so there's a lot of complications to it. Piaggio and I have a few projects right now. As a matter of fact, one of them is on the zoning agenda for Thursday, in downtown Shelton. And, first, we do have structured parking, first level is, retail, commercial, and then the upper levels are residential. So it is a true mixed use development, but it's appropriate in that downtown environment. Here, yes, you're downtown, but you're not, your entrances and exits are in the residential area, so I just didn't see it. And then the other factor is also trying to accommodate the neighborhood. And that's why, as I said, I brought in Tucker Chase, to assist in putting this program together.
Anybody else have any questions on the committee?
Any additional questions?
Sir, thank you.
Anybody? Jamie? Do you have any questions of us, Kristen?
No, I just wanted, how long does this process take, or how long will it take?
I don't know the dates off the top of my head, to be honest with you.
Well, once we go through the whole process of, once we finish interviewing, which is all today, and then we'll go through, and then we will present to the RDA, and, the public will have the opportunity to listen, we're taping, so they'll have the opportunity to listen to the presentations. And then the way it works, it gets presented, we'll look at what the RFP had and the, submissions that were given us, and then it goes before the town council. They have the ultimate,
So we're saying about 6 months, by the time we go through the whole process.
I
Yeah,
don't see
we're hoping
that
not
at
that long.
all.
Yeah.
No, I mean, we certainly wouldn't do August, because I think a lot of people do vacate. I think it would be, August would be a tough month to try to present something to town council, but I think September, we would present it to them.
Well, it was a pleasure, meeting all of you.
Yep.
And, as we go forward, if you need any additional information,
Yeah, we might, so we'll reach out.
just send it, to us, and, we'll try to be as open and as possible to get you whatever you need. Ultimately, as I said, when I was first approached with this program, even before, it went out, I did give a lot of thought to, and I knew that from the controversy that the previous one had generated, I know it created, some issues in the town. But I also knew that whatever was gonna happen, it needed the involvement of the neighborhood and, certain people within that neighborhood, especially those that were, very critical of what took place previously. So I reached out to them, and as I said, I had numerous meetings with them. So what was created, I can't take full credit for. I collaborated with what was presented to me as what they believed was something that was, was acceptable. There was a lot of concerns about the historic, issues, and, because one of the designs had some contemporary buildings, and, that's not, the historic nature of that area. So there was a lot of consideration that took, place developing this. So I just wanted to make sure that, I passed that on. All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.